All right, good to see everybody this morning. And we know spring is here when baseball season starts, so that's exciting for those who care about that. And so the bracha for study, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shekidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So we're at the end of chapter 3 in our text, page 20, and we're about to get to something in chapter 4. Because I don't always read ahead before we start class, but we're coming up to a pretty momentous part of the story in the history of Israel with the battle against the Philistines. But first, coming up on the end of Samuel's call to prophecy and his his relationship to the people of Israel. So we're first in the previous part of chapter 3. It was all about Samuel and Eli in the Mishkan in Shiloh. But now, verse 19, Vayigdal Shmuel, Va'adonai haya imo, v'lo hipil mikol devarav artza. Samuel grew up, and God was with him, and nothing from his words fell down to the ground, which is just an interesting poetic way of saying that, in other words, either everything that God spoke to Samuel was paid attention to, or everything that Samuel shared that God had said to him, he shared. Like, in other words, he didn't leave anything out from what God shared with Samuel. Just an unusual phrasing here. Yeah, and that Alter translates it that way too. We'll look at the commentary in a moment. Let's just do 20 and 21 also. Vayeda kol Yisrael midan va'ad be'er shava ki ne'eman Shmuel lenavi la'Adonai. And all of Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, which is a common way of saying from north to south and everything in between, that Samuel was faithful as a prophet for God. So just interesting to me, how is it that all of Israel knew that, right? What's the story that will help us understand how all the people of Israel got to know Samuel? How is it? I mean, we don't know. We only know Samuel from his own mother and father and from Eli in the Mishkan. So we only know in that very, very restricted kind of personal family story of how Samuel became how Samuel was chosen by God for God to speak to him. But how is it that all of the people of Israel heard about Samuel? Is it because all of the people of Israel come to Shiloh for the holidays to offer sacrifices, and they meet Shmuel there, and maybe Shmuel has some kind of encounter with them as they bring sacrifices, that he gives them a blessing or something like that? Who knows? Who knows? It's just if the book of Shmuel is going out of its way to tell us stories about Shmuel as a prophet of Israel, why not tell us about how Shmuel's prophecy became renowned in all of Israel? Barry, do you have a question? No. Okay. 21, Vayosef Adonai leherao v'shilo, ki nigla Adonai el Shmuel b'shilo b'davar Adonai. And God continued to be shown or to appear in Shiloh because God revealed God's self, or God was revealed to Samuel in Shiloh with the word of God. So maybe that's how, and that like people were around in Shiloh because that was the place where this Mishkan was, and the people overheard God speaking to Samuel, maybe. So I don't know. I'm just saying that it raises a question in my mind how all of Israel knew that Samuel was a prophet. So let's look at the down below in the commentary. It's clear from many examples that the chapter division in the Hebrew Bible, which was borrowed from the Vulgate, that's the Latin translation, and not introduced until the 16th century, does not always follow the sense of the text. In other words, in printed Hebrew Bibles or in manuscripts like the 15th century. So the 15th century is when the printing press was invented. So until that point, you have manuscripts. So it's not until the 15th century that chapter divisions were introduced into Hebrew manuscripts. Before that time, we don't have chapter and verse. So how it came to be that those printing Hebrew Bibles choose to adopt the Latin version of chapters and verses into Hebrew, that is a whole other piece of scholarship to try to understand the connection between Jewish printing houses and Christian printing houses. Maybe they shared the same printing press. It's just, I don't know. It's just interesting to me. Some of the first printing, I think first Jewish printing presses were like in Venice, other places in Italy. Anyway, okay. A.J. agrees with the most modern commentators in treating chapter 4, the first half of chapter 4, of the first verse of chapter 4, as the conclusion of the subject dealt with in the final verses of chapter 3. So that is, the first half is what we have on this page. It says, chapter 4, verse 1, Vayehi devar Shmuel l'chol Yisrael. And the word of Samuel came to all of Israel. So it might make sense that goes with what we just read, that God revealed God's word to Samuel in Shiloh, and then concluding that with Samuel spoke to all of Israel. Okay. Or it could be Samuel spoke to all of Israel, and then we'll see what happens in the rest of the verse. So anyway, just pointing this out because Alter is going to say the same thing. Unclear how to, where to start the chapter. The classical Jewish commentators, however, accept the Masoretic paragraph division, according to which chapter 3, verse 21 is the opening of the narrative which follows in chapter 4. The revelation in verse 21 would then be a command to Israel through Samuel to go to battle with the Philistines. So, according to the Masoretic text, then, chapter 3, verse 21 is the start of a new subject. So, we don't have, unlike the Torah, we don't have really anymore a set scribal tradition of writing the rest of the books of the Bible on a scroll. I mean, there are Haftarah scrolls that synagogues have, but it's just not common anymore to write the rest of the books of the Bible like the Torah is written. So we don't have really Masoretic notes like we do in the Torah. Like, in other words, if you're reading a printed edition of the Torah in a Chumash, every now and then you'll see a letter Samach or a letter Pei just randomly after, and it looks like a new paragraph is starting. And the letter Samach or the letter Pei corresponds to how the line looks in the Torah scroll itself. So, either I think the letter Samach means that there's just a space in the line, and so you have part of a line written, then a space, and the rest of the line written. And the letter Pei is part of the line written, and then you start a new line after that. Okay, so you have that in editions of a Chumash, the letter Samach and the letter Pei, to represent the Masoretic tradition of how the verses are written in the Torah scroll. So our edition here, Samuel, doesn't include that. But let me just see 1 second. Let me just pull something off my shelf. A traditional commentary that includes the book of Samuel in it. Yeah. Okay. So there is something like Mikraot Gedolot, the traditional commentary of medieval commentaries with the Torah, which we studied when we studied an English translation when we were as a Torah class. So they have that for the rest of the Bible too. So if I looked in this edition of Samuel in what is a Mikraot Gedolot kind of edition, it has kind of these paragraph breaks in it. So let me just see how it does chapter 3 and 4. No, it doesn't break it up anymore. Yeah. Yeah, so it leaves it as chapter breaks, like we have in our text. So I'm not sure where to find the Masoretic edition here. I'm just according to the commentary here on page 20, there's just a question about how to divide up, where actually it makes sense to divide, to end one topic and start a new topic. Okay, so the commentary on 19 through 21 on page 20, and Samuel grew, see on chapter 2, verse 21. Let none of his words fall, all his prophecies were fulfilled. From Dan even to Beersheba, the regular formula to denote the whole extent of the land of Israel. It's first used in Judges chapter 20 and is common in the books of Samuel. Dan was the northernmost town in the Holy Land, and Beersheba the most southern. Established, the Hebrew ne'eman means much more and includes the sense found faithful, authenticated. Yeah, it's a common adjective that is applied to prophets, that they are ne'eman, that they are faithful, etc. And now on 21, the two halves of this verse are not tautologous, that is, they're not repetitive. The first part speaking of appearances and visions, the second of revelations in direct speech. Appeared again, the word of the Lord was no longer precious. By the word of the Lord, in speech and not in visions. Okay, so let's see what Alter has to say about the ending here of chapter 3. We're on page 257 in the Ancient Israel. He let not fall to the ground any of his words. The antecedent of his is ambiguous, but since the point of the narrative report is to confirm Samuel's prophetic authority, the more likely reading is that God did not allow any of Samuel's words to go awry, but fulfilled all of his prophets' predictions. From Dan to Beersheba, that is, from the far north near Phoenician territory to the Negev in the south. Stalwart or faithful, that is, Samuel's authority as prophet was recognized by all Israel. And the Lord continued to appear, the Lord was revealed. This emphatic indication is an obvious counterpoint to the first verse of the chapter. Instead of being withheld, divine communication is now regular and repeated through the person of Samuel. And then the first half of the first verse of chapter 4. Although the conventional chapter division attaches this brief clause to the next episode, it's clear that it is actually a final summary of Samuel's new authority at the end of his dedication story. The next words of the text, in fact, refer to a military initiative undertaken by the Israelites without Samuel's authorization. So that's interesting. Yes, Dove.
So in 19, something is worded here that I find very interesting. Samuel's prophetic authority, the more likely reading is that God did not allow any of Samuel's words to go awry, but fulfilled all. So
yes.
So it was.
So in other words, Alter is suggesting Samuel uses his newfound ability to make some predictions based on feeling empowered by God, and then God fulfills those predictions. Yes.
So it's giving him credibility.
Right. And it also seems counterintuitive in that a prophet usually speaks what God tells him to speak, as opposed to making something up that then God fulfills.
Yeah.
So I don't really get that, but that's what Alter is suggesting from his reading of chapter 19. In other words, I read it as Samuel grew, God was with him, and none of Samuel's words, see, because the Samuel or God is not explicit in the second half of the verse, it's just his. So none of his words fell to the ground.
Yeah.
So that I get that to mean that the people listened to him, or Samuel repeated everything he heard from God. That's how I would understand it, that yes. Samuel repeated everything that he heard from God. But Alter is suggesting that God, it's a more radical, I think, understanding of this, and sort of in my mind, it's not the most obvious. That he's suggesting that God did not let Samuel's words fall to the ground, and that so it requires more of an understanding of the role of the prophet. And Alter is suggesting that that Samuel might have spoken without directly hearing from God, but inspired by God, and then God fulfilled Samuel's words.
Thank you.
Okay. So now the interesting thing is that Alter is suggesting that the first half of the first verse of chapter 4 belongs as an ending to chapter 3, and that the rest of the verse of verse 1 of chapter 4 is Israel acting on its own. But the chapter division suggests that it's Samuel's word speaking to Israel that prompts Israel to go into battle against the Philistines. So how this is divided is important. Is it Israel acting on its own, or is it Israel acting on Samuel's command? If Israel's acting on Samuel's command, then we have to wonder, because we're going to read about it, how Israel fails miserably in the war with the Philistines. Men get killed, and the ark is captured by the Philistines. If God commanded it, why would this happen as a result? But if God didn't command it, then just a second here. If God didn't command it, then we would understand why Israel lost. Okay, so now let's start reading chapter 4. First few verses to see what happens here. Vayetze Yisrael, we're on page 21. Vayetze Yisrael likrat plishtim la milchama, vayachanu al ha'even ha'ezer, uflishtim chanu ba'afek. Let me just text my son, who was just trying to call me, to say that Okay. So Israel went out to war against the Philistines, and they encamped at Even Ha'ezer, and the Philistines were camped in Afek. 2. Vayarchu Flishtim likrat Yisrael, vatitosh hamilchama, vayinagef Yisrael lifnei Flishtim, vayaku b'ma'aracha basadeh ke arba'at alafim ish. So the Philistines arrayed themselves against Israel, and the battle spread, and Israel was hit or struck before the Philistines, and they were slain and they were slain by the army in the field, about 4,000 men. Okay, so assuming 4,000 Israelites were killed by the Philistines in this battle. 3. Vayavo ha'am el hamachaneh, vayomru ziknei Yisrael, lama negafanu Adonai hayom lifnei Flishtim, nikcha eleinu mishilo et Aron brit Adonai, vayavo bekirbeinu, vayoshienu mikaf oivenu. So the people came to the camp, and the elders of Israel said, "Why did God smite us today before the Philistines?" Understanding that God caused them to lose to the Philistines. Let's take the ark of the covenant of God from Shiloh and bring it into our midst, so that he will save us from the hand of our enemy. Okay, so they went to battle against the Philistines. 4,000 Israelite men lost. The elders say, let's take the ark and bring it into our midst to save us from our enemy. Verse 4 on page 22, Vayishlach ha'am Shiloh, Vayis'u misham et Aron brit Adonai tzvaot Yoshev ha'kruvim, V'sham shnei v'nei Eli im Aaron brita Elohim Chofni u'Phinchas. So the people sent to Shiloh, and they took from there the Ark of Covenant of the Lord of Hosts, who sits on between the Kruvim. So I think all of that is God's name. Adonai Tzvaot Yoshev HaKruvim, the Lord of Hosts who sits on the Kruvim. And this is more like a battle image of God. As I've pointed out before, the idea of God sitting on the Kruvim, and the Kruv in this context compared to other Near Eastern images of their gods, small g, is a human form riding on a bull or some other kind of animal. And the Kruvim that were on top of the ark in the Mishkan, we're not sure what that Kruv was, but it could be this kind of battle image. It's possible. Newer images of a Kruv, that is, not biblical but rabbinic, is based on the Roman idea of a child with wings. So it's so the cherub idea that somebody looks cherubic is based on this child idea, a childlike angel with wings. So that's a more Roman idea. The biblical idea, which is a more ancient idea, is a human riding on a bull. And that bull or lion has wings also. Okay? So they took from there the Ark of the Covenant of God of Hosts who sits on the Kruvim. And there, while they were taking the Ark from Shiloh, were the two sons of Eli who are with the Ark, which is here, with the Ark of the Covenant of God, but this here it's Brit Elohim and not Brit Adonai. Just interesting that the editor is just changing God's name there in the verse. And so with the Ark was Hophni and Pinchas.
So they're still around, even though...
Yeah, they're not dead yet. So, I mean, the prophecy was they're going to die, and this is the story where they're going to die.
Oh.
Okay? Yeah.
Also,
yeah.
I should know this. Has the nation of Israel fought with the Philistines before?
Yeah, Samson fought with them.
Right, okay.
Remember? Okay, so that's in the book of Judges. So we've seen the Philistines before.
So this is sort of I know there was interaction between the two lands.
Yes, but this is, yes, you'll see that a theme of Samuel, which takes up most of the book, both books, is the constant battles with the Philistines.
But with Samson, like, is this the first where it was actually an army of?
No, I think there was a battle, but I don't think here in Samuel, it's as if all of Israel is going out to battle. Okay. In the books of Judges, it's parts of Israel, like some tribes at different times and different places are doing the fighting. Okay?
Rabbi?
Yes,
Rabbi?
yes, Dov.
Why would the Israelites endanger the Ark of the Covenant? They're bringing it in to...
Well, they think it'll be like an extra supernatural kind of help.
I understand, but at the same time, they're putting it at risk.
Absolutely. So it's unclear whether Samuel allowed this to happen or did not allow it to happen. And it's all dependent upon how we understand the first half of verse 1. Was this part of Samuel's word to go out to the Philistines? And since Samuel had nothing to do specifically with them taking the ark, but if Samuel was involved in commanding them to go to war, maybe he condoned the taking of the ark. But if Samuel was not involved in the original command to go to war, then Samuel's not involved in this taking of the ark. So we don't know. We don't know why they're thinking it. We'll see some commentary about it momentarily. But let's just go on a little bit more before we look at the commentary. Verse 5, Vayehi kevo Aron brit Adonai el hamachaneh, vayariu kol Yisrael tru'a gedola, vatehom haaretz. So when the Ark of Covenant of God was brought to the camp, all of the people of Israel sounded the shofar. It says here, all of Israel shouted with a great shout, but a truah is a shofar blast. So I think they blew the shofar loudly, and the earth rang out. Like that's how loud the shofar sound was, that it seemed as if the earth was shaking or ringing. 6, Vayishma'u Flishtim et kol ha-teruah, vayomru, me kol ha-teruah hagdola hazot b'machaneh ha'ivrim, vayed'u ki Aron Adonai ba el hamachaneh. So the Philistines heard the sound, the sound of the shofar, and they said, "What is this sound? This great shofar sound in the Hebrew camp?" And they knew, I don't know how they knew that the Ark of God had come into the camp. How the Philistines knew that, don't know, but they're supposed to make the connection. At least the narrator is having us believe that they're making the connection that this loud shofar sound means that the Ark of God is coming into the camp. How the Philistines knew this, what did they know about the Ark of God, how much did they know about Israelite practice to know that this had something to do with the Ark of God, have no idea. 7, Vayir'u ha-plishtim ki amru ba Elohim el hamachaneh, vayomru oy lanu ki lo hayata kazot etmol shilshom. So the Philistines saw that they said, oh no, they didn't see, they were afraid. Sorry. The Philistines were afraid because they said, God has entered the camp, and they said, Oy lanu. So oy is not just a Jewish sound, it's everybody says oy. Oy for us, that something like this, that nothing like this had happened yesterday or the day before. Like, in other words, we defeated the Israelites and killed 4,000 people. Now God is in their camp, oy. 8, and they say oy again. Oy lanu, mi yatzilenu, miyad ha'elohim ha'adirim ha'eleh. Eloheim ha'elohim ha'makim et Mitzrayim b'chol makah bamidbar. Fascinating what the narrator is saying. The Philistines are saying, oy for us, who is going to save us from the hand of the mighty God, of this mighty God. Now, I'm translating it in the singular, but the word Elohim is a plural word, so the adjective adir, mighty, or is in the plural, and ele, these, is in the plural, but I'm translating it as from the hand of this mighty God. This is the God who smote the Egyptians with every plague in the wilderness. So, interesting to me that the narrator of Samuel is suggesting that the Philistines, this is a couple hundred years after Egypt and the crossing of the Israelites of the sea, and the plagues in Egypt. So this is a couple hundred years that the Philistines knew the story. It's possible. I don't know. I mean, Homer writing the Iliad and the Odyssey how well known, well, I mean, it's well known around the classically trained Western world. We all know the story of the Iliad and the Odyssey, right? But it was such a thing known in the ancient Near East. And how was it known? Right? Who's telling the story? Like, there's no newspapers, and there's no video recording of, like there's what like I don't know, FDR speaking in Congress on December 8th. That's a famous thing, and everybody knows that. Or I don't know, the JFK being assassinated. We all know that because it's there on record on videotape. How did people know the story back 3,000 years ago? Like, why would the Philistines care about what the Israelites did in Egypt or know about the Israelite God doing these things in Egypt? So it's just interesting to me that the narrator here is projecting Hebrew thought onto the Philistines, and whether it's true or not, who knows?
But it's also a Hebrew, an Israelite narrator telling the story
No, right.
and
So
making
I
that.
mean, just
I mean, it could be just the
assuming,
assumption, right?
right? But assuming that the Philistines know this, I don't know. It's just interesting to me. 9, Hitchazku vihiyu la'anashim plishtim pen ta'avdu la'ivrim ka'asher avdu lachem vihitem la'anashim v'nilchamtem. So, be strong and be men, Philistines, lest you become slaves to the Hebrews, as they were slaves to you. Be men and go to war. So, in other words, here the ark is supposed to strengthen Israel and save Israel, and the Philistines are reacting to the ark entering the Israelite camp as a source of inspiration to the Philistines to suck it up and find the strength to fight. 10, Vayilachamu plishtim, Vayinagef Yisrael, Vayanusu ish le'ohalav, Vatehi hamaka gedola me'od, Vayipol miYisrael shloshim elef ragli. So the Philistines fought, and they smote Israel and chased them from their tents. Or no, the men fled to their tents, and it was a great smiting, a very great smiting, and 30,000 men fell from Israel. And 11, Va'aron Elohim nilkach, u'shnei v'nei Eli metu, Chofni u'Phinchas. The ark of God was taken, and the two sons of Eli, Chofni and Pinchas, died or were killed. But it doesn't say were killed, it just says died. But the translation says were slain. Okay. So let's look at the commentary here on these 11 verses. Okay, it starts at the bottom of 20. Samuel communicated the revelation which he had received to all Israel. The great disaster. By the rout of the Israelites at the battle of Aphek, the Philistines established their domination over nearly the whole country. Then there began, 21, that great and vital struggle, on the outcome of which depended the political existence and even the very survival of Israel a fateful issue which David finally decided by his crushing defeat of the Philistines, which we have to wait until 2 Samuel 5. Okay, so we have the whole first book of Samuel, which will be battles with the Philistines until the beginning of the second book of Samuel. It was a threat of extinction at the hand of the Philistines, which, more than anything else, welded the tribes of Israel into a political entity and led to the establishment of the monarchy. Okay, so that's an important point for the history of Israel, that the battle with the Philistines united all of Israel in battle against them and prompted them to form the monarchy. Okay. Went out. The bald statement in the Hebrew text might suggest that the Israelites took the initiative in this war, either to ward off a threatened attack or to throw off the yoke of allegiance to the Philistines. It's better, however, to see in this event the beginnings of an expansionist movement on the part of the Philistines, the ultimate aim of which was to establish an empire in their hinterland in Canaan. Their earlier domination over the Israelites was probably only local, from Judges 13. The hill country of Ephraim was not a rich prize, but if, as is likely, their ultimate objective was the plain of Esdraelon with its fertile soil and caravan routes, it was necessary first to eliminate the threat to their flanks, which the mountain tribes presented. So this is just an explanation from how the Philistines fighting against a segment of Israelite society became a more full-blown war against the entire Israelite society. Okay, Even Ezer and Aphek, these two places cannot have been far apart, but no satisfactory identification has been suggested. If Even Ezer here is identical with the place of the same name in chapter 7, it must have been near Mitzpah, whose site was a little north of Jerusalem. The name would then be used in anticipation. It was not given until 20 years later on the occasion of the defeat of the Philistines there. It's argued by some, however, that a site near Shiloh is suggested by the narrative which follows. Shiloh was probably the objective of the Philistines. Aphek is probably at some spot in the plain of Sharon, commanding the entrance to the plain of Dotan, the natural line of march for an attack on central Palestine. Okay, the Philistines. They were survivors of an Aegean people which had established an advanced civilization in Crete, Asia Minor, and the Greek mainland. Okay, we don't know for sure, but this is one scholarly idea. Pressed by wilder tribes from the north, they had migrated southward and established themselves early in the 12th century BCE in the Shephelah, the coastal plain of Canaan, from Jaffa to the Egyptian frontier. They were a loose confederation of 5 city-states, Gat, Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, and Ekron, each with its seren, or lord. A hardy race of fighting men, well equipped with the resources of an advanced and ancient civilization, they had made themselves still more powerful as a fighting force by their discovery of the use of iron weapons, with which they superseded the bronze hitherto current in Southwest Asia. Okay, so they had iron versus bronze. It's all more advanced military technology for the time. Okay, on verse 2 of the army, rather in the battle array. In the first encounter, the Israelites were not put to fight, but suffered their losses on the battlefield and retired to their camp. The field, that is the open country where the Philistines were able to use their chariots. People, the use of the term people for army is characteristic of the time when there was no standing army, but a levy of all men capable of bearing arms. The elders, before the creation of the monarchy, the elders or heads of families were the natural authorities in the country. They acted as magistrates, as heads of tribes and districts, and on occasions as the Senate or executive council of the people, for example, in war, in great political matters and in matters of general importance to the people. Fetch the ark. The ark was likewise taken into battle in the war against the Ammonites in 2 Samuel 11, as it had gone before the people at the invasion of the country and the siege of Jericho back in Joshua 3 and 6. Okay, so the ark had been used before and will be used again as a way to try to bring extra strength to the people. Obviously, it was felt that the presence in battle of the most holy object in Israel's worship would inspire courage in the army. But at the same time, the words of the elders show that they were influenced by beliefs current among other peoples of that age, which identified a people's gods with his shrine and sacred objects. Who sitteth upon the cherubim. See Exodus 25. The divine presence was especially associated with the ark. Were there with the ark, that is, accompanied the ark to the battlefield. Shouted with a great shout at the appearance of the ark in their midst. Now they felt certain of victory. And on page 23, the Hebrews, the name ordinarily used of the Israelites by foreigners and by the Israelites of themselves when speaking to foreigners. They knew, on investigation, they learned of the presence of the ark. There was not such a thing, namely, to bring the ark onto the battlefield, an emblem of the presence of God. These mighty gods, the Philistines being polytheists, they naturally supposed that the Israelites likewise had many gods. And in the wilderness, the conjunction "and" is not in the Hebrew text. A.J. follows Ralbag, one of the medieval commentators, in supplying it, but the conjunction fits awkwardly in the sentence, and a better rendering is, who smote the Egyptians with an utter overthrow in the wilderness. The allusion is the overthrow of Pharaoh and the Egyptians in the Red Sea, and not the 10 plagues. Because the idea, it's all manners of plagues and in the wilderness. So, but the Hebrew says all manner of plagues of Egypt in the wilderness. So the plagues happened in Egypt, not in the wilderness. So it's the commentators trying to figure out what is the Hebrew referring to? What plague of the Egyptians was there in the wilderness? It must have been when they crossed the sea. The Israelites were in the wilderness then at that point and saw how the Egyptians were drowned in the sea. Okay. 10, they fled. This time the Israelites are routed. We have no details of the further course of the Philistine invasion, nor do we need them. The issue is too clear without them. We hear no more of Shiloh, which must have been taken and sacked at this time. The defenses of the country were cut in two, and an easy road led over a series of open valleys to the north. The whole of the central range must have fallen into Philistine hands, and as they held also the coast roads, the occupation of the plain of Estra alone became inevitable. The last vestiges of the Egyptian occupation were swept away, and with the capture of Beit Sha'an, the Philistine conquest was complete. Beit Sha'an stood at the eastern end of the valley of Estra alone, near the Jordan. That it fell into the hands of the Philistines is evident from chapter 23, verse 10, and confirmed by the results of archaeological investigation. Okay, so we have a route that is referred to here. So let's just see what Alter has to say on this. Okay, so 258 in Alter, the Philistines. The Philistines were part of the general incursion of the so-called sea peoples from the Aegean. The prophet Amos names Crete as their land of origin, into the eastern Mediterranean region, perhaps less than a century before the early 11th century setting of our story. There is some evidence that they first migrated to Anatolia, then moved southwards. Anatolia is like southern Turkey. They established a powerful presence in Canaan on the coastal plain, concentrated in the region a little south of present-day Tel Aviv. They were intrepid warriors, note the martial exhortation of verse 9, and also exercised a mastery of military science and military technology. In the coastal plain, they were able to deploy iron chariots, which seem to have been lacking among the Israelites, as well as infantry. Perhaps their failure to extend their mini kingdom of 5 allied cities more than a dozen or so miles eastward from the coast was related to a loss of the strategic advantage of chariots as they went up into the high country. The Philistines drew up their lines and the battle forces were deployed. Interesting, the language of strategic deployment is attached only to the Philistines. Battle forces is literally battle. Although the precise indications of these terms are unclear, their use elsewhere in the Bible makes it evident that they had a technical military application. The lines, the Hebrew ma'aracha, is a singular with the sense of battle formation or front line. 259, let us take to us. The addition of the seemingly superfluous personal pronoun suggests how the elders arrogate to themselves a sacred object for their own purposes, conceiving the ark magically or fetishistically as a vehicle of power that they can manipulate for military ends. The Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, this would have been a large case made of acacia wood with carved cherubim on its top, containing the stone tablets of the law given at Sinai. As the material residue of the defining encounter between God and Israel, these tablets were viewed as the most sacrosanct possession of the nation. Hence the horror at the end of this episode over the news that the ark had been captured by the Philistines. Troops. The Hebrew has a collective noun, am, people, which in military context refers to the ordinary soldiers. The Ark of the Covenant of the Lord of Armies enthroned on the cherubim. This extravagantly full title is a kind of epic flourish reflecting the power that the elders of Israel attribute to the Ark. Armies, hosts in older translations, underscores the Lord's martial nature. The cherubim are fierce winged beasts, imagined as God's celestial steeds, and so the carved cherubim on the ark are conceived as the earthly throne of the invisible deity. Okay, so that's what I said earlier, that and I'd shown you pictures in previous weeks of archaeological discoveries from other ancient Near Eastern societies of gods riding on winged animals. Hophni and Pinchas in an odd stylistic tie. Each time the two sons are mentioned in this chapter, their proper names are stuck on at the very end of the sentence, as though the precise identity were being isolated for opprobrium. The camp of the Hebrews. Hebrews is generally the designation of the Israelites when they are named by other peoples. 260, God has come into the camp. Here Elohim is the subject of a verb in the singular, but in verse 8, in proper polytheistic fashion, the Philistines use the same term, but construe it grammatically as a plural gods. Every blow, the Hebrew makah also means plague, an obviously appropriate sense here, but it's important that the writer uses the same word in verse 10, though with a military meaning, for a theological irony is intended in the pun. They feared the might of the Lord who struck such terrible blows against Egypt, and then they themselves strike a blow against Israel, which actually does not have God in its midst, only a sacred paraphernalia. Here, as elsewhere in the Bible, the national fiction is maintained that all the peoples of Canaan were intimately familiar with the Exodus story and deeply impressed by it. Muster strength and be men. There may be a pointed antithesis in their speech between gods and men. In any case, they summon stirring rhetoric to rouse themselves from their fear of a supernatural adversary and to go out to do battle. His garments torn. Oh, no, we haven't gotten that far. Okay. So, it's 10:24. So let's stop here for today, and we'll continue the story next time. Hope everybody has a good rest of the day, and Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Take care.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you,
Shabbat
Jonah.
Shalom.